Hi, it's Heather. Now, admittedly, today's conversation is a pretty big one. It's incredibly personal to me as I prepare to share with you some of my own struggles and my own lessons about building healthier relationships. And before we dive into that topic as big as healing attachment wounds, I thought I would just take a second to invite you to join Tuesday Group. If you've ever felt stuck in unhealthy patterns of people pleasing, or if you find yourself struggling with setting boundaries yourself, this can be a supportive space where we unpack all of that together. We meet every Tuesday afternoon from 12 to 1:30 Pacific Standard Time. It's a chance for all of you women to meet, connect, share, and get support from other women who truly do get it. I'd really love to see you there, so please consider checking out the link. You'll find it in the show notes. Now, on to Mother Mayhem. Today on Mother Mayhem, we all need boundaries. We need to understand where we end and someone else begins. And now I rather imagine that she didn't feel safe in a boundaryless friendship either. Welcome back to Mother Mayhem, the narcissistic abuse recovery podcast for daughters. I'm your host, Heather Gray. And ladies, today, if it's all right with you, I'd just like to sit with you for a bit. It's going to be just you and me. No listener letters this week. And changing it up a bit more because right about now usually is when I start to tell you what the show's going to be about. And honestly, I don't quite know yet. I don't know where this conversation is going to take us. All I know is that I'm willing to find out. So, this conversation started with a thought I had been having. And it was a thought that I thought was going to be like an Instagram reel. I wanted to be pithy and witty, and I thought I'd say something that spoke to the idea that love isn't supposed to be unconditional. It actually should very much have conditions. And as daughters, I know that unconditional love is something that gets so tangled up for so many of you because all you ever wanted from your moms was to experience unconditional love. And not having that has been the source of your greatest trauma and your greatest pain. I know this to be true. So when I started getting all pithy and tried to shoot off a quick reel to remind you that love should absolutely come with the conditions based on respect, I quickly opted to not try to start this conversation as a reel. And I thought to myself that I would just make it one of my quick Friday episodes and I would put it off to the side there. And that's the moment I kind of caught myself and I questioned why. Why is a conversation about unconditional love off to the side for the daughters? Why isn't it front and center? It's that kind of conversation. And I realized in that moment, it's because it's a conversation that I'm afraid to put front and center. Because it's a conversation that's really important to me. It's relevant to me, and one I have learned about a lot quite personally in the past year, and I got scared. I have a feeling in my body that this isn't a conversation I talk or walk around. It's a conversation I have to move through because that is the work of narcissistic abuse recovery, or in my case, the work of somebody with an emotionally limited mother. You've heard me acknowledge that my stepmother wasn't narcissistic. She was more emotionally limited. And as a result, I myself have gotten all tangled up in the notion of unconditional love a time or two. And it has been the center of my own work and my own healing for the past year. I think I'm ready to talk about it, to bring y'all on my journey, to share my experiences, not to be indulgent and certainly not to trauma dump here, but so you can learn from my example and see what doing the work sometimes looks like. Also, too, I want you to see that it's possible to get on the other side of it. So we're playing this episode a little bit by ear, ladies. I think I just need to start with where I was going to start the conversation with all of you in the first place. And that's the idea that while the concept of unconditional love is often praised and lauded to be this holy grail of love and relationships, it's important to recognize that healthy love should actually have conditions. Genuine, healthy love thrives on mutual respect, clear boundaries, and accountability. And when love is entirely unconditional, it can blur the lines of what's acceptable. It leads to situations where people might not uphold their boundaries or accept responsibility for their actions. Healthy relationships are built on the understanding that love involves respect and awareness of each other's own needs and limits. Setting conditions isn't about limiting love, but actually about ensuring that it remains respectful and supportive. And right here, ladies, is where I have really, really gotten it wrong in my own life. And I have been working really hard to hold personal accountability with myself on the choices I've made, while also having grace for myself and reminding myself that I have always done the very best I could with the tools I've had at the time, and I've always had the best of intentions. And I'm still doing that because, after all, aren't we all works in progress? Some of you might have heard and remember an episode I did with all of you back in May. I called it This Is Me, All In. And it was totally one of those episodes that I put off to the side because I was too scared to put it front and center. I'm going to link to it now in the show notes in case any of you want to listen or return to it if you already heard it the first time. Now, in that episode, I shared how 2023 was quite the banner year for me. Alongside starting Daughters NPD and Mother Mayhem, well, I also experienced the ending of two really close friendships. I ended one friendship in February of 2023, and the second friendship, well, she just blew it all up at the end of the year, between Thanksgiving and Christmas. By the time May of this year came around, when I had recorded that episode, I had gotten through a pretty good chunk of the grief, I think, and I had landed in a pretty good spot. But me being me, I knew I wasn't done the work yet. I knew that there was more for me to look at, learn from, and hold accountability with. And that is the work that I've been doing since. Now, I remember when the first friendship started to feel like it was spiraling out. It wasn't feeling really good for me. It wasn't feeling good in my body. And I had been talking to another friend about it, and she reflected back for me, well, Heather, the way you do friendship hurts you. And that line, whew, man, it just really hit me. I felt it. It landed in my chest. But it didn't hurt me like a sucker punch when she said it. It actually felt like a relief. It felt like being seen because the way I had been doing friendship at the time, well, it really did hurt me a lot. Here's what I figured out. In the larger world, at work, with acquaintances, with regular friends, with clients, with my family, on the show, I am the me that you've all come to know. I consider myself pretty open, vulnerable, approachable, and balanced. I like to think I'm authentic. I feel pretty good in saying that you all know me pretty well by now. And if we were to have a one-on-one conversation, you would feel like you were talking to the same person you hear on the podcast. Admittedly, my language might be a little bit rougher in person, and my energy would definitely be a little bit higher in person. I tend to tone my energy down when I'm on here to respect the content of the show and the conversations we have. I know my energy could be pretty overstimulating and dysregulating for people listening to a trauma recovery show, but I think if you were to meet me in public, you would recognize me and not feel like you were dealing with two different personalities. I might be wrong on that, but that would certainly be my hope. Things seem to shift for me, though, when it comes to my people. you know what I mean by my people, right? The ones that are in the inner circle, the ones closest to you. If I were a spider web, they are the ones closest to me in that ring just outside the center. And honestly, I blame Meredith Grey for this. You know what I'm talking about, right? From Grey's Anatomy. Christina becomes her person. Then, when Christina goes off to Switzerland, Alex becomes her person. Here's what I figured out about myself. Here's what I learned. Something funny happened to me when people in my life became, well, my people. If I was their person, I turned it to mean exactly that. I was their person, all in. You heard me confirm that back in May. And I have always taken an incredible amount of pride in that myself. I was an all in person. I'm still an all in person. My people could count on me. My people can still count on me. And once they were in, once I loved them and they loved me, I loved them unconditionally. Once they got in, I now realized that I created a story that the rules now didn't apply to them. Why? Because I assumed that this was true for them toward me. They loved me unconditionally too. So that meant that they knew me, they knew my heart, they knew my good intentions. They would never try to deliberately hurt me. My heart and my vulnerabilities would, of course, be safe with them. I trusted all of these feelings would be trusted to be true because that's what I was offering them. That's what it meant to me when I told them that I loved them. And it wasn't until later, in picking up the aftermath, that I would come to understand and accept that not everyone loves in the same way as me, even when they're in relationship with me. So the idea of boundaries in these relationships, well, it was pretty foreign to me on some level. Boundaries were for the other people, not them. Boundaries were for the people who didn't have my trust, for people who didn't know my heart. They were for the others, not for my all in people. What I've come to see and understand is that once I became someone's person, and once someone became one of mine, I let conditions kind of fall by the wayside. I let them go. Then, in letting go of conditions, I ended up letting go of accountability too. Because here's the thing I experienced when I became someone's person. I'd come to know so many things about them. I learned why they moved through the world the way they did. I learned what had hurt them in their lives before me. And of course, I wanted to be a safe person for them. I wanted to be that container. I wanted them to feel seen and cared for just as they are. I wanted them to feel loved. I would never want them to feel judged or have a moment with me of not feeling accepted. Many listeners have reflected back for me that when they hear me on the show, they see my heart. They feel my love. And honestly, that's the best compliment I can receive because I do love with my whole heart. I do absolutely love out loud. My heart is on my sleeve, and anyone I love hears me. I say I love you at the end of every conversation I have with them. And that's always going to be true about me. I'm never not going to want the people in my life to know that they are loved by me. And I'm always going to want that love to be more than a word. I'm always going to want it to be a verb. But here's where I took it sideways. I wanted to create safe spaces for my people. But how does one really create a safe space for someone while also creating conditions and boundaries inside that space? It felt like two polar opposites. The work I've done in recent months has highlighted for me that I never really learned how to do that part. At my core, I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist, so my brain always goes to what was I thinking? What was I feeling? What did I do? I think in these patterns when considering myself And you guys have heard me walk you through it on the show. So, what's my behavior cycle on this? Well, it seems I become someone's person, and I don't think I assign myself this role or even assume it, but I do tend to have quite intimate, strong relationships in my life, and that role easily finds me. And obviously, you guys don't need to be the shrinks in the room to figure out why or to connect those dots. So, I become someone's person. That means I'm safe for them and I offer them an unconditional space to be seen, understood, and known. They get to be themselves and they get to be loved for who they are. Then, by being that accepting person, I end up becoming overly permissive, less boundaried, and I end up tolerating far more than I would ever allow or encourage any of you to allow for yourselves. You can see how big of a safe space I create and how it can be hard to set boundaries around that safe space when I've set my parameters for what it means to be someone's person so incredibly high. And I'm an all in girl. So when my people are having a hard time, I am all in on that. And somehow that turns into these omnipresent, ever aware relationships where I'm always available for their hard time or whatever they're going through. That's what all in meant for me for the longest time. Being aware, being present, being that safe container. Now, at the end of 2023, just before everything unraveled, she asked if I thought I had an attachment disorder, and I brushed it off quickly with a no. The way she asked me made me feel like I was walking on eggshells, accusatory, judgmental. It wasn't until much later that I realized how unsafe it felt to actually give her an honest answer. Some people might listen to this conversation, hear me trace this arc, and think she was right. Maybe she was, but it never felt that way to me. My understanding of attachment disorders involves anxiety, something pressured, uneasy, a constant sense that something isn't quite right. But I didn't feel anxious. To me, it just felt like how I loved big, wide, accepting love. It felt as clear to me then as I'm explaining it now. And for some, that might still read as disordered attachment. Maybe it is, but I'm okay with that because the truth is, I'm having the conversation. I'm working on it. And no matter what it's called, I'm on it. And I'm good with myself. And if you agree with the attachment label, well, get ready because there's more. Here's something else I learned. When my people are hurting, I end up caring more about them and what they're going through than I do about myself. I tell myself I'm good, or at least I'm better off than they are. So whatever they throw at me, I take it. They're the ones struggling. They need me. It's their turn, not mine, because I'm good. That's another big realization I've had in the past year. When my people are hurting, I tend to self abandon. Their needs start to matter more than my own. Want to know what that looks like in real life terms? Well, when it's subtle and on a good day, it means I'm dimming my light and I'm playing small. I stop sharing my good news. I hold back on talking about how well things are going in my life or my work. I don't talk about the fun things I do or ways I spend time, and I certainly don't bring up any problems I have or any worries on my mind. And at its absolute worst and most intense, it looks and sounds like me not knowing what I feel like in my own body, but being able to describe to all of you with absolute accuracy how they are feeling in theirs. How's that for people pleasing, perfectionism, and attachment issues all wrapped up in one neat little package? The friendship I ended at the start of 23 likely felt like a surprise to her. I feared she felt sucker punched. She had been going through a tough time for months, and as her struggles continued, our dynamic began to shift. I noticed the changes and I tried to understand what was happening. Despite my efforts to discuss it, I ended up feeling kind of rebuffed and ignored. I kept telling myself it was okay because she was having a hard time. I ignored the feelings in my body and I hoped things would improve. And I just tried to keep being present for her and her hard time. By February, I finally tried to address how the friendship was affecting me. I had planned to be honest and open, acknowledging my feelings, and I had also committed to talking to her about things I hadn't been honest with her about. Yet, when I attempted to have that conversation, I felt brushed aside again. That night, I went to bed sort of resolved. I was just going to try again later. But when I woke up the next day, every part of me was saying, not this, not this. So I listened and I decided to end the friendship, and I did it in a letter. Looking back, I felt pretty haunted by that choice. Our friendship deserved more, and she deserved a more thoughtful closure. I imagined she might think of me as a hypocrite, and I wouldn't blame her given the content that I share here and the conversations I'm now having with all of you. I've worried that you might think the same of me if you were to ever find any of this out. That fear has kind of felt like a weight on my shoulders, something I've been avoiding. But now I've decided to just face it and own it, even though it embarrasses me. I know I did my best with the tools I had at the time. I could have done better with more resources and more courage. But when you ignore your body's signals for so long, it becomes harder to act as you would want to in those really difficult situations. I've learned that I needed to speak up sooner. I tried to wait it out, thinking her hard season would eventually end and we'd have plenty of time to work it all out when she was feeling better. I just didn't listen to my body until it screamed. And you can see the cycle, right? I was her person. She was having a hard time. I was feeling some kind of way in my body and ignored it until I was just quarter past stick a fork in me done. I self abandoned so many times. For months, I self abandoned because my life was actually starting to come together. I'd figured out daughters and PD. After years of failing, I wasn't failing anymore. So in my mind, I had my thing now. I was okay. I could be there for her. I just stopped being there for myself. I spent a lot of time looking at whether or not this pattern of mine might be codependence. After all, a lot of us daughters certainly can develop that tendency. Now, the user friendly way of understanding codependency is that it's a relationship dynamic where one person's sense of self worth and happiness is overly dependent on the approval or the needs of another. And that's the part that's never really felt true for me. I've never felt that my self worth or my happiness was tied to others' needs or their happiness. But before all of this, I had really lost my way because I wasn't successful at work. Being professionally successful has always been my Achilles heel. You've heard me acknowledge as much on here on the show. And for years, I wasn't successful at work. I wasn't getting to use any of the skills or have any of the conversations that I knew I was capable of having. And I had so much free time on my hands. So much. So, what did I end up doing with it? Well, it seems I threw myself into helping my friends. If someone should benefit from my skills, why not them? I had the time, and with the pandemic adding to the mix, I focused on my relationships. My friends, well, they were facing significant challenges, and naturally, I was going to want to help because I was able to. Complex emotions, intricate dynamics, unpacking childhood trauma, sign me up. I'm your girl. That's what I'm good at. That's my jam. That's my thing. Of course, I was going to help. After all, it hadn't been that long since I was the one who had had some big problems and spiraled out myself. Because before 2023, I was striking out at work and we had adopted my dog, who is an out of his mind reactive type with fear aggression. and he'd bitten two people. Trying to take care of him and learn everything I could about reactivity and helping him, well, honestly, it did me in. Yeah, ladies, everyone listening, I became undone because of a dog. My friends, though, they were really there for me, as crazy as I felt, as out of my mind as I felt. They listened to me when it was my turn, and it was me who was spiraling out. They sat with me and listened to my work dreams endlessly. I thought that's what we did for each other. I thought it was mutual, and nothing about it ever felt unhealthy or like I was doing friendship wrong, except I was. In May, you heard me tell the story of how my sister friend just blew it all up, how mean she was, how she just completely, utterly turned on me and took everything I loved about myself and weaponized it. She showed such disrespect and devalued our relationship entirely. And, well, that gutted me. And it really honestly still hurts to think about how it all went down, because I didn't deserve any of it. However, I shouldn't have implied that I didn't see it coming. After all, she had unleashed on me earlier in the year. And when that dust up was over, she mentioned that she did that to test how much I would endure. And yes, I stayed after she said that too. I'm sure you can see what I now recognize. That big, safe container I'd worked so hard to create wasn't truly safe for either of us. I deserved boundaries and respect, and it wasn't right to be tested like that. We all need boundaries. We need to understand where we end and someone else begins. And now I rather imagine that she didn't feel safe in a boundaryless friendship either. It probably didn't feel secure to get away with being so mean to me without being held accountable. After all, part of what came to light in the meltdown of 2023 was an impulsive decision I had made back in 2018 that we had never addressed. I had just moved across the country with my husband, and it was such an isolating, lonely, and scary time. We were fighting constantly, and I felt trapped, and I was questioning the big move. Everyone I love seemed so far away, and in a moment of desperation, I asked her to talk to him for me, not to fix things, but to manipulate him into seeing my side. It's painful to admit that, but if you've experienced trauma, you know how destabilizing it can be to feel pressured into lying or manipulating someone else. Looking back, I regret that moment so deeply, not only for how thoughtless it was, but also for how we never talked about it afterward. That one impulsive mistake silently festered between us for 5 years. Ultimately, it seemed to have played a huge role in how I was misunderstood and misinterpreted in the very end. It's a lot for me to own and even more for me to forgive myself for, but I am learning from it. It also doesn't escape me that this is the second time in this conversation where I have realized how, when I'm dysregulated and feeling backed into a corner, I try to take the easy way out instead of communicating directly. I wasn't honest with my other friend about some things, and here's another example of me doing the exact same thing. Recognizing this pattern has been humbling, but it's also been a pretty big part of my recent growth. I've learned that avoiding those hard conversations only prolongs the pain for myself and for others. And now I am more committed to facing that discomfort head on in the moment, knowing that that's how real healing and stronger connections are actually built. So, no, I never fully acknowledged with her or even with myself how those things had made me feel. I didn't recognize what it was like to be told I was her person and still be treated poorly, nor did I confront how it felt to learn that it was all a test to see how much I was willing to stay through. In my mind, she was just spiraling. She was dysregulated. Her trauma brain was in overdrive, and I convinced myself that because it was trauma brain, she didn't mean it. As a friend, I focused on helping her feel calm, and I ignored how her actions impacted me, how those words triggered my own trauma brain response. It was a profound moment of self abandonment. And I don't think I fully understood its impact until after it was all over, until she'd blown it all up. Once I really sat in it, I realized how many times I had self abandoned. Her trauma, well, it was significant, and I put immense pressure on myself to be that safe place, to be the opposite of everyone who had ever hurt her before. I thought that's what being her person meant, but it never occurred to me to be that safe container while also setting conditions and boundaries for it. You can see that pattern, right? It's like crystal clear. I was her person. Being her person meant being accepting, and being accepting turned into being overly permissive. That's the work I've been doing. That's what I'm looking at, honestly, with myself. How I trusted their good intentions, so I expected the same in kind. How I turned being someone's person into being someone's everything. How I attract people who don't really have anyone else or who have few people. And then I become their person. And then I feel obligated to be their everything, to be their safe space for all things. This conversation, whew, it isn't easy, my friends. It's obviously exposing, but being someone who's willing to have conversations like this and do it publicly is also who I choose to be and how I want to move through the world. These are the conversations I want us to be having. This is what I would say if no one was listening, because honestly, I have been waiting and wanting to say this for so long, but I haven't wanted to give them the satisfaction of my thoughts and feelings about them. After all, I've learned that they don't really deserve any more of my vulnerability. But you do. Not having this discussion and avoiding these topics has made me feel like a hypocrite and an imposter on my own podcast. Not addressing the hard parts has made it challenging for me to share the lessons I've learned. And as you can hear, I have learned so much from this experience, so much from this pain. I'm paying attention to my body now, and I'm checking in with myself about how I feel as I move through the world. I'm asking myself the questions I encourage all of you to ask yourselves, and I'm really listening to my answers. When your friend's circle blows up, kind of like mine did, you suddenly find room for more. I'm now more aware of what I want, need, and expect from a friend. I know too what I bring to the table, what I'm capable of, and what I deserve. And I understand my blind spots. I'm recognizing my own automatic tendencies, and I'm learning to disrupt these patterns earlier in the game. And I'm doing it with a lot more ease. I'm also learning about intimacy without falling into the trap of becoming everyone's therapist, a professional hazard that really obviously blew up on me. And y'all might need to send a prayer or two or some good wishes to my husband, because I've been working hard to show up differently in my marriage too. My patterns weren't exclusive to friendships. I'm taking full accountability for my life and how I move through the world. It's the most true to myself I've ever felt. I was deeply, deeply hurt by my sister friend, truly wounded, actually, and I had to work through my own betrayal trauma. For a while, my pain, well, it was all I could see. But I leaned in, I felt my feelings, and I shared them. I released them, and I learned from them. I opened myself up to the reality that this experience, it was going to change me, and I let it. My edges, well, they're a little bit rougher now, and I don't think I move through the world as softly as I used to. But I'm also more honest, brave, open, more true to myself. And I'm not done yet. I've learned to be unapologetic about who I am. I understand the parts of me that need to change. In reflecting on what I've learned and how I've evolved and changed, I've also realized the importance of not allowing this podcast and this community to fill the void left by the friendships. It's been a journey to ensure that I'm not just using my work as a substitute for the connections that I've lost. Balancing my professional passion with my personal healing has been really important and quite critical. And I've worked hard to make sure I'm not just pouring my energy into my work, but also fostering meaningful relationships in a more healthy way. And I know the parts of me I refuse to change. I'm still going to be an all in friend. I am an all in person. I'm an all in therapist. I still wear my heart on my sleeve and I love out loud. I will always want my people to have a safe place in me and with me to land, and I want to be present for them. What I've learned is that I can be someone's person. I can be a few people's person, actually, but it only really works if I am my person first. Not every relationship pattern tied to attachment issues is toxic. Not every aspect of how we interact with others needs to be overhauled. The key here is to identify which patterns no longer serve us and work on those while ensuring that the people we connect with are both capable of and interested in meeting us where we are. I know I'm going to be tested again, and I hope I lean into those tests to sort of cement the new habits that I'm working towards. I'm going to mess up again, too. I know I'm going to, but God willing and the creek don't rise. Hi, Southern friends. When I make mistakes, they won't be the same ones. May my future mistakes be new ones, and may they continue to serve my growth and be lessons for all of you. Being professionally successful had always been my anchor, the thing that made me feel grounded and validated. And when that was stripped away, I began to pour everything into my relationships. Unconsciously, it ended up creating these deep, all encompassing connections that were filling the gap that used to be my career. Well, I didn't feel that my worth was tied to others in that classic sense of codependency. I do realize and see that I was finding my sense of purpose and meaning in those friendships. Here's what I've learned though. When love lacks boundaries, when we start defining it as unconditional and leave out the respect, the mutuality, and the conditions that should come with it stops being healthy. It stops being love in its most supportive form. Instead, it turns into something else, something that serves our fears far more than our growth. And I think for a lot of you listening, that probably resonates deeply. You've lived your whole life being told love was supposed to be unconditional, especially the love from a mother. But when that love isn't grounded in mutual respect and healthy boundaries, it will hurt you. And in many ways, it probably still does. So, what I want you to take from today's conversation more than anything else is this: healthy love is conditional. It has to be conditional on respect, conditional on mutual care, conditional on boundaries that keep you safe and that honor your well being. The work I've been doing this year isn't about whether or not I'm capable of loving or being loved. We established that. It's about learning how to do it in a way that honors who I am, my worth, and my right to exist fully in my relationships without self abandoning. And that is what I want for all of you too. So let's just keep sitting with this together. Let's work on defining love in a way that keeps us safe, keeps us whole, and keeps us being seen. Because when we learn to love with boundaries, we learn to truly, deeply love ourselves. Now, if today's conversation connected with you, and I certainly hope it has, and you're ready to explore these ideas a little more deeply, now is when I encourage you to join Tuesday Group. We're meeting weekly to discuss challenges just like this: healing from codependency, breaking free from toxic patterns, and learning to trust yourself again. This isn't just a support group, it's a space where real change is going to happen. You're not alone in this, and the community we're building is here to help you along the way. If you're interested, please do head over to the show notes for that link to sign up. All of you are in this community of women around the world who are in this with you. And I, for sure, most definitely, am in it with you too. Bye for now. I do hope you enjoyed today's conversation. If you have a question you'd like me to consider for the show, please do email me over at heather@daughtersnpd.com. You are always welcome to share your story or questions by recording yourself using the voice app on your phone. For best recording quality, please do record directly into your phone without using headphones or Bluetooth speakers. We're building an incredible community as well over on Instagram, and I'd love to see you over there too. You can find us at Daughters NPD. Lastly, if you love what you've been hearing here on Mayhem and have found the show helpful in your own trauma recovery, please do consider becoming a Mother Mayhem sponsor by purchasing Simple Scripts for Saying Hard Things. It's a resource I created that provides the right words for the hard conversations, and it covers life, love, and work. You'll find a link for that in the show notes. If you know another woman who needs this conversation in her life, please do share the show with her. Your reviews and social shares help spread the word, and I hope you'll consider doing so. Special thanks to Heather Clark for editing the show. She's in my head and knows what I meant to say when the words come out backwards. Thanks so much for your time today. As always, I'm in it with you. Bye for now.